All right, well, hi everybody. I want to welcome you to our video chat on tele-assessment. That's sort of a little phrase we're going with now. I think people are putting tele in front of everything. But we were running to spend some time with some early interventionists and leaders across Virginia talking about how assessment practices are going, because I'm hearing that that's a point of anxiety for some people, trying to figure out how am I going to get the information I need to determine eligibility, to figure out how to prepare for the IFSP. But I'm also hearing people that once they're getting into the tele-assessment and getting some experience under their belt, finding some pretty amazing successes. So that's what I wanted to do with the video chats, was to give folks that are doing it the opportunity to talk about what's working for them, maybe talk about the challenges they've had and how they've overcome them, because I think we can support each other by hearing those ideas from people who are in the trenches with you. So that's my idea. So my name's Dana Childress. I work with our professional development team here in Virginia. I'm one of the early intervention professional development consultants. And so I'm going to kind of be the guide for our conversation today. So I'm going to call out the names of the folks who are joining me, and I'm going to ask them for a quick introduction, and then we're going to dive in. So Brandi, do you mind going first with your introduction?
Sure. As you said, my name is Brandi. I work in Danville-Pittsylvania County. I am a service coordinator, but I am also a human development professional, as well as the intake coordinator, so to speak, for our agency, for our program. So I do most of our initial intakes and assessments for our little ones coming into our program.
Great. So like a lot of the folks on here, you wear multiple hats, right, Brandi? So that's
yes,
great. Thank you. How about you, Kathy? Do you mind going next?
Hi, I'm Kathy Phillips. I'm with Middle Peninsula-Northern Neck, and I'm the local system manager as well as a developmental therapist. So I participate on a lot of the assessments.
Great. Thank you, Kathy. I appreciate that. Erika, since you're on Kathy's team, do you mind going next?
Yes, so I work with the Rural Infant Services Program, and I'm the speech therapist. So for those ones that need language assessment, I am on those evaluations.
Perfect. Thanks, Erika. I'm glad you're here. Stacey, can you go next?
Sure. I'm Stacey Jackson. I'm the system manager in Stanton and Waynesboro, but I also serve the role as a service coordinator. So I, as Brandi had mentioned, do the intakes, most of the intakes for our system, and then participate then on most of those initials. I do carry a small caseload of families that I service coordinate for long term.
Awesome. Thank you, Stacey. And Kim?
Yes, I work with Stanton and Waynesboro. I provide service coordination as well as developmental services. So also get to see that from the organizing of the annuals to participating in the assessments.
Thank you. Good. So I love it. We've got service coordinators well represented today, which is fantastic, and developmental service providers kind of speech there. We've got folks from different viewpoints, and I love having some Stacey and Kathy being some of the leaders in our systems too. So I really wanted this for the chats to have lots of different perspectives. So I'm glad we were able to get together. So where I wanted to start with the chats was I really want to think about what happens before and during, kind of what tips and strategies you guys are using. So let's start with thinking about how do you prepare the family. So I'm interested in finding out maybe what you're doing. It could be at the point of intake, or it could be maybe even just between that intake and the time where you're going out for the assessment for service planning. If there's any particular things you're talking to families about, or tips or tools that you're using with them. So I think I might throw this one to Stacey first. Stacey, what are you guys doing in your system to get families ready for, it's a new experience anyway, but having to think about having an assessment of your child through video and virtually is really something different.
And we do, because it is so different, we start that conversation with the family at the initial, and we often log in for the assessment using the same platform that we did at the intake, so the family is somewhat familiar with it. But when everybody arrives, I, as the service coordinator in that role, I introduce everybody on screen and talk with the family about how it's going to proceed. But then we also, staff developed a really helpful paper of, depending on the age of child, the materials that the parent could have handy just in case they were needed during the assessment. And they also included if they don't have that particular item, some substitute ideas that they could use. And families have found that really helpful. Just a few things that they can gather ahead of time. And then we talk through a little bit about how those might be used so that when the assessment occurs, they're comfortable with those things.
I think that's a great idea. I've heard some folks feeling a little stressed by asking families to have things available because what if they don't? But then I've also heard folks feeling it's giving families some way to prepare and some things, and they're picking common items that are hopefully things like a little bowl or a spoon or things that, we're hoping not something a family would need to feel like they need to go get. So Kim, I'm going to throw this to you. Did you have anything to add, since I know you and Stacey are in the same system? Any other things that you're doing ahead of time to prepare families?
In my role as working through service coordinator with annuals, I think I'm finding the assessments easier. Know the family, what they have. You've established with the child some of the baselines of what they're doing. So that seems to flow much more easier. I like what our team went and did as far as giving objects for the family together, but I've also found an increased need for flexibility. We're in that moment of doing that assessment, of trying to figure out and watch the child with different objects. The other day we had a child who could take 2 pencils and they were just playing with them and get the points end to end, and then had a ball that had a little hole in it and could get the pencil point down in that. So trying to take that and include that in the assessment.
So that's a great point, Kim. So, that flexibility, making some suggestions, but then using your really good observation skills to just see what you can see, what is happening in that natural environment. Brandi, you were shaking your head a lot. Did you have some thoughts about that?
Well, I found that a lot of times families would typically not want us to, depending on the evaluation, be present during like a feeding session or during a mealtime. But I found it very helpful when a child is sitting at the table and the device is pointing towards them, and I'm seeing them during mealtime. I'm seeing lots of things happening. Their self-help skills, their feeding skills, their language. It's very helpful actually during feeding time. So you can see lots of skills that cross over all areas of domains, so to speak.
So that's some of that flexibility that the assessment, you might even have access to things maybe you wouldn't have before, because the parent can kind of take you along take you along whatever that device is for you to see some of those routines. How about you, Kathy, in your system? Anything you're doing to prepare families, maybe even to prepare them to get ready so we can see some of those routines and activities?
Right, and the service coordinator is the key person in making the contact with the family. And there are many similarities to what we do when we're in person rather than on a screen. And the first is establishing rapport with a parent and getting them to share truthfully what are their concerns. We've had a nice opportunity recently to pick up children with atypical development, especially attention issues or issues that might not have been in the forefront when the service coordinator talks to the parent, and the child might have been referred for speech, and then when the service coordinator talks to the mom will share, I don't know, he's just so busy. I think he's just too busy to talk. And then we find out that, yes, mom was like that. Erika, we did have one like that a couple of weeks ago, that mom had shared, well, she's just like I was. Well, mom had actually been in early intervention also. So
wow.
It really did give us a nice baseline. So the service coordinator and establishing rapport and just getting the parent talking about their concerns and what they're seeing, and then sharing all of that. They typically will fill that in on the first for pages 2 and 3 in the IFSP and send that out to the assessment team, so we get to see that in advance, along with getting, if we can, the medical records in advance. But rapport is definitely the key, and get them talking.
Absolutely. And, I've heard some folks saying, well, I'm a little nervous about how to build rapport when I'm not going to get to be face to face with families. But I love it that it's, like you said, Kathy, it's not that different it's different. We're going through a camera, but we're still
Yes.
trying to do that, build that relationship from the beginning. And I would think the more comfortable we are doing that, hopefully the more comfortable the parent will be being guided into the step of the actual assessment. So I wanted to ask you, Erika, I don't know, feel free to, if you have some input about preparing the family, but Kathy kind of gave me a nice segue into how the teams prepare. So how team members get prepared for the assessments. I love it that Kathy said kind of sharing the information that was gathered from the family, the service coordinator got, and sharing it with other team members before that assessment. Any other thoughts about how your team gets ready for the virtual assessment? Like, do you guys touch base ahead of time or review that information? What does that preparation look like for you?
Yes, sometimes we do touch base ahead of time, either by phone call or email. And for me, it's reading the initial home visit that helps me to prepare. And for speech specifically, I sometimes like to show a picture and have the child name. So preparing some pictures to share the screen during the assessment and prepare in that way.
Yeah, and I imagine when you kind of have that information ahead of time, you can know a little bit more about what you're going into and maybe tweak what you might have done face-to-face before and be ready to be able to do that more virtually. Kim, I'm going to ask you, any other thoughts about how your team gets ready? Like, how do you decide who's going to do what on the assessment? Who's going to lead the discussion, or who? I'm curious about how that's working for you.
We've contacted via phone or email. We also take a look at, I tend to do a lot more of the preemie, the gross motor and fine motor pieces because of my nursing background and that. So, but we discuss it all beforehand and have a good idea going in of who's going to divide the different roles.
That sounds really good. I think that would make it smoother if it was kind of predictable and people knew what they were expecting, is because that would help it look smooth for the family. How about you, Brandi? Any ideas about how your team is getting ready? You know, anything, is it pretty similar to how they were doing it before, or any changes now that they're interacting virtually through the assessment?
It's pretty similar, the same way we would have done a face-to-face with the family. We do separate out usually our intake. We do like an intake and initial appointment first, and then we do our assessment. And I usually touch base with our therapist, and we kind of go over information in advance of the actual appointment. But it's very similar to what Kim was speaking about. We kind of know who's going to do what area, and it's very fluid. It flows. I was worried about it being, on a screen, but it does really flow well.
Good, good. Okay, well, that kind of gives me a nice segue to my next question. So I'm interested to find out what's happening during the assessment. So everybody's logged in, the family has logged in. Give me an idea of kind of how that flows. We've talked about, you guys have set up who's going to do what, but I'd love for you to give any tips or strategies for how to support the caregiver and, helping you get the information you need on your assessment tools. So let me hear, Stacey, do you have any thoughts about that? Like, how do you help? What tips or what are you doing that's helping you get the information you need, not only for your test, but kind of the big picture when we're thinking about what you need to know about the child's development?
A lot of that is coming through as we're talking with the family ahead of time, but then explaining the process that we're going to follow, introducing the members in terms of what they'll be looking at, but also thinking in terms of what their everyday looks like, and thinking about some examples where we might see this or you might see that, so that our concern initially was we didn't want the parent to feel like we're just shooting questions at them, since we're not there to actually do the activity. But then also the team members have worked really hard with families to kind of coach them through, okay, this is what I'm looking for. So one of the ways we can get to it is if you do this. So kind of prompting the families to reach for those items that they have ahead of time. Or if they don't have them, then really working to describe what that looks like for them.
Yeah, so that's sort of that creative, flexible thinking that we have to approach the assessment at, right? I know there's been some discussion about, like, well, what do I do for my ELAP items that, if the parent doesn't have a little bottle with pegs to pull out, like, who has that? Or the 1-inch blocks. So I'm curious, I love it that Stacey, you kind of brought up, we're going to describe what we are looking for and then think of different ways to see it. So Kathy, I don't know if that's something that you guys are working towards too. I saw you shaking your head.
Very, very definitely, and I'll share an example with you. family did not have any blocks, that the child was just not building with blocks, but the mother said, you know, when she's at the high chair, she can stack about 6 little Cheerios. We were not concerned about fine motor and, you know, wonderful little pincer grasp. Do we need to go back at some point and check that item off? There were no concerns in that area and doing just fine. So, and mother's creativity, of course, was complimented to give her, the child, the opportunity to do that. So, and also sometimes just saying something like, well, what does he like to play with the most? And we've been in a lot of playrooms, more than we're usually in when we go to in-person assessments, and that can be very telling. You know, some have just the most wonderful setup with their toys and materials, and then others are maybe not as conducive for good attention or for learning. So that is great experience, and most of the families have really enjoyed like showing us what the child does, and even taking us outside on the computer to see how little Johnny plays with the golf club with his, you know, no, we're not hiding the toy under the couch to have him use a rake to get it, but by golly, he is a whiz with hitting that ball with Big Brother's golf club. So
that's a great example, Kathy, of sort of that good observation and just observing the natural stuff that's happening and knowing what you're looking for as an assessor.
Yes.
So you can tell that what you're seeing with the golf club, she could probably be showing you balance and coordination and all kinds of cool stuff. There's some flexibility there too. Erika, I'm curious about you from a speech pathologist perspective. You know, say if there's items on the test, the books, you know, the books are always an issue. If a family doesn't have that or doesn't, you know, or even how you might be trying to be able to see the oral motor skills and things that might have been easier for you to assess when you were face to face. How are you adjusting to that?
For me personally, I think I am more relying on parent report, but I think that can be good sometimes as well, because then the kid doesn't have to like perform, and it's like, can you do this? And then like, can you like do this? So I think you don't want too many questions, but I think I have had to rely on that a little more. But then what I can do is ask the parent to send me a video later of something, and to see like for oral motor, like can they imitate those faces? And if they don't want to perform with an audience, go ahead and send me a video, especially, well, specifically for the kids I'm going to pick up.
That's a great idea. So using some, I've heard of folks doing that with even before the assessment too, the parents sending a video in of either something that goes really well or here's the challenge. This is what I need your team to see. So using the video is a great idea. I love that idea, Erika. One thing you said jogged me too about one of my favorite like coaching prompts is show me. So that idea of, you know, well, can you show me? Could I see it? So sort of like you're right, balancing how many questions we have to ask with guidance about what I need to see, why I need to see it, and then ideally what isn't the best if you can just observe it. So Kim, I don't know, how's that going for you with, you know, getting what you need when you think about filling out your tool and kind of getting that functional? Let's think about the functional assessment piece of this too.
I would say pretty well, except there was one challenging one that I did have, and
oh, I think you're muted again, Kim. That's okay.
one that was challenging. The rest of them have seemed to go really well, but incorporating the mom into assisting and what skills we were looking at or finding examples, and I have found that the assessments sometimes take longer because of that aspect and that, but eventually we got all of our information and stuff, and the child wasn't frustrated, and it was, but it was a little tricky on how to ask her to do things for us in relation to, we would have just been sitting and doing that within the assessment.
You know, and I think some of this is like giving yourself the space to go, it's going to be hard sometimes, and I'm going to learn from that, and I'm going to be able to do it differently next time. And, you know, kind of reaching out for your team for support, because, you know, we want to hear about all the successes, but some of them are just going to be hard. But then there are face-to-face assessments we walk away from that we're like, oh, that was a doozy.
Yes. Yes.
So I definitely hear you about that. Brandi, you were shaking your head a lot about that. I'm wondering what you're thinking. How's that working for you to be able to get the information you need and kind of find out, I need to confirm, you know, like here's how the child did on the test, but I really need to know, like, how's he doing in his everyday life and what's that function look like?
Right. I think in terms of the initial assessment, it's really given more independence and kind of tossing the ball more to the parent. And it really sets the stage for coaching in early intervention. And I found it to be very helpful. I have had challenging visits where we've had to stop in the middle of it and just revisit. I was shaking my head a lot when Kim was mentioning it's taking longer. It's taking longer for the entire process for me personally and for our program, whether it be preparing for the intake, preparing for the initial assessment, preparing the team. It is taking a lot longer, and our visits are taking longer as well, but I feel like it's being more thorough, and we are really setting the stage for the coaching model. And I flat out tell parents, hey, we use functional assessment. So that means you know your child better than I know your child. So tell me what this routine looks like. And if it's a toothbrushing activity and the parent has concerns about it and doesn't like, you know, the child's having some sensory aversions, I'm like, well, let's go to the bathroom. And it is flexible, and we all have to extend a little bit of grace to ourselves as well as to the family. So I think it is taking longer, but it's really setting the stage for the coaching model.
So that's a really great point. Yeah, they're sort of laying that foundation of whose active participation do you really need? You really need that parent who's then going to interact with the child. Stacey, I saw your hand go up. What would you like to add?
I was just thinking about what Brandi said. I know typically when we're doing face-to-face visits, because schedules are often condensed with travel time and multiple providers and trying to juggle the distance, there have been times during COVID-19 that we have done the assessment on one day and come back on another day to do the IFSP, which we don't typically do unless a family really requests or needs that. But what I found with telehealth is we've been able to do it that way because scheduling is not so challenging. And you've got everybody on the phone at the same time during the assessment to say, okay, now's probably a good time to stop. Let's come back and do the IFSP, and everybody's right there with their calendars versus the emails or the texts or the phone calls back and forth to get that second meeting scheduled.
So a little flexibility there in kind of the whole process, especially if it's going longer, like Brandi and Kim said.
Yes.
Yeah, that sounds really good. I've heard folks saying that too, that they're kind of enjoying the little flexibility without all having to do the travel. But, you know, it's just all that adjustment that's happening. So what I would love to hear from you guys is some strategies or advice you have. So if you're thinking about, and you might think about yourself when you started this, or think about folks that might be kind of just this week or, you know, just within these couple of weeks starting out and getting into the tele-assessment mode. Because we have some programs in Virginia who've been doing it for a month, 2 months. We have some that are just starting. So I'm curious about what kind of your best strategies are that have made it successful. Maybe what strategies you use to overcome some of the challenges you guys talked about. Or if you were giving advice to an interventionist who was feeling a little worried about it, what could you say to kind of, you know, help them know it's going to be okay? For example, I'll give you an example. On another video chat I did, one of the pieces of advice was, know that there's going to be technology hiccups. Accept them, plan ahead for them, and then breathe through them, because somebody's going to freeze, somebody's going to drop out. You can come back together. Worst case scenario, you touch base on the phone. Like, you just have to kind of roll with it, knowing that's going to happen. So I would love to know what advice you guys have based on your experience for others. So Erika, if you don't mind if I start with you, or any things you could recommend to others who are, you know, jumping into and kind of weaving through the path of tele-assessment.
The first thing is to be kind to yourself.
Yes.
Yeah, so this is a completely different job. Teletherapy is a different setting. So if you don't know what you're doing, that's a good thing. Because if you're feeling comfortable, then I don't know if you're doing it right. I went heavy on the CEUs at first, just found free videos, and that seemed to help a lot. I contacted a friend that is a teletherapist. We did a teletherapy session. That helped. So just reaching out and knowing it's okay to ask for help, and that really was the biggest thing for me. And I say that, but I'm not the same to myself, but be kind to yourself.
such an important thing, and patient. And, you know, just I've heard folks say how important it is right now, especially when everybody's separated in their homes. Like, reach out to your colleagues for the good things and the struggles and get ideas. You brought up another a good point, Erika, about training. Like, there are some good videos that are starting to come out that are showing telepractice, and there's a few that just came out last week and this week that are showing early intervention telepractice. So when you can see it, that's not only helpful for you, but those are actually things you could share with families too, to give them an idea of what to expect. So seeking out, you know, people are desperately trying to pull together some training. There's also stuff already out there about the medical telepractice. So I love that idea of trying to build your own skills. Kind of, somebody said to me yesterday, we're building the plane while we're flying it. So being kind to yourself as you're learning. Kathy, what ideas do you have? Any advice you're giving your staff, or you're thinking big picture? Like, I love what Erika said about being kind.
I do too. Thank you, Erika. And we do, just even on a really good day, have major technology issues where we live. So it's something that we all live with. But by the same token, so many of our families already are using something like FaceTime or Skype or something like that. So not only the parents are used to doing that, but the children are also used to talking to Grammy and Poppy on the screen. So it has certainly been less of a challenge for them than I thought it would be. The only piece of like actual advice in preparing would be, and it took me a while to get this straight, is A, make sure you're set up in an area that your husband's not going to be walking in the background, you know, with his cup of coffee. Make sure you have your pens, your tools, and everything, and that you're set up so that you're good to go. I know I keep my water handy and things like that. So
that's a great piece of advice. I don't know if you guys could hear, but a little while ago, my son was knocking at the door. It was like fabulous. But that's what's going to happen to us and to the family. So rolling with it. Your dog comes through. I love it, though, as much as you can prepare your situation. Like you said, Kathy, so you're kind of centered, you're ready to go. You're not going to have the distractions, you know, because I think it's probably worse for the person whose husband walks through than it is for the people on the other side, because we're like, oh. But I love that idea of just preparing and kind of taking a deep breath even before you click the camera on, so you're ready. Let's see, Kim, did you have any suggestions for others who are getting ready for tele-assessment, or even how to provide it? Any advice you would share?
I agree on the giving ourselves grace and understand that there are going to be challenges out there, and we all are there to provide the best for the child, and eventually we're going to be able to get eyes on them and and interact in that way, and be able to identify if there are any other things. So
yeah, just kind of giving yourself permission to know I keep thinking this will end, this pandemic, and, you know, life will get back to some kind of new normal, you know, so we will eventually have the opportunity to meet the families in person. So I love that sort of long-term perspective that, you know, get the families in, providing the support the best you can is probably really good support now. Like, you know, acknowledge that what you're doing is going well. You can add what you need later. So I love that, Kim. Thank you. Stacey, any other suggestions or advice you'd recommend?
I guess one of the pieces that, as I've listened to everybody talk today, that feeling of being self-conscious with doing assessments online. I think part of, for me, being self-conscious was I'm used to being in the home to do the assessments, and now I'm trying to do it online. But if we think about it, with the initials, we haven't been in the family's home yet. So this is what they know. This is where their comfort is. And as you all pointed out, they've been doing computer or online conversations with families for a month and a half now. So they're very comfortable with it. So once I thought about it that way, that helped me to be a little less self-conscious about what's happening at this exact moment.
Yeah, a little, like, reduce your anxiety about it a little bit. Yeah, go ahead, Kim.
Well, I had one of the providers say to me, you know, this is really going well, you know, never thought you would have a 60-minute session go 60 minutes via telehealth, and say, what if the parent says they don't want to go back to us being in the home? Because they think it's going so well.
That's the question. I think that's a question, is our field and our state and our programs are all going to have to look at. Another system manager said recently on a meeting that she said something like, you can't put this toothpaste back in the tube. So I don't know what's going to happen in the end, because I think it's like our field, we've been thrust into tele practice. Most people have never done it before, are doing some amazing things and are finding that for some families, they might even like it best this way. So I think we're going to have to see what the long-term effects are. I hope that there'll be some flexibility, and I think there could be, as practitioners, I'm hearing people say, this might even help me be a better coach in the long run. So there could be some real positives coming out of the struggle and the changes that everybody sort of didn't have a choice but to work through. So Brandi, I'm going to invite you to share any other advice you would give to folks who are getting into tele-assessment.
I agree with Erika with when she mentioned, kind of some training. My providers and I, we tested out several different platforms to see what was very functional, what worked best for us. And of course, we're very flexible with the family and what they're comfortable with. So we try to go with what they've, they're familiar with. But another thing that I have done in preparing families is actually mail out some things in advance of our assessments. So, and having things handy, I have a whole little cart next to me, is something that I keep next to me as the decision tree, different things like that. I mail out copies of that in advance to the families and explain to them. And I do typically send them, with their permission, a text message with a video of what is early intervention in the state of Virginia. And then I'm looking to build what does telehealth look like for the families as well. So overly communicating with them and providing them something for them to have in their hands, as well as practicing with the providers on different platforms.
Those are a bunch of great ideas. I think as a parent, I would love to have something in my hands, something that I can bring to the meeting, that I can see and feel. I've heard of folks doing some screen sharing, even at intake, to go through some of those things, or screen sharing the decision tree document, like you said, to help families work through that. As I mentioned, there are a couple of videos that are coming out, and I think they were less than 10 minutes long, I believe, that are showing. It's so nice because you hear from the parent and the service provider, and they talk about how the visit works. So those might be some resources, Brandi, that are coming out. I'm happy we can connect after this and I can send you the links. Those aren't Virginia resources. Those are produced somewhere else, but they're still great. Another tip that I heard that you reminded me of, Brandi, was, I can't remember if somebody said it, was if you have a staff member who has a child in the birth to 3 range, having a practice assessment, having that person pretend to be the parent and practicing online. Many people have already started assessments, but it's a way to just sort of, work out the kinks in your skills, and maybe, like Stacey said, get yourself so you're a little less self-conscious and feeling more comfortable. Well, I would just give you guys one last time. Is there anything else that came up for you that you think it would be really helpful for other people who are working through, getting ready or doing like you guys are doing tele-assessment during the week? Any other tips or strategies? Feel free to raise your hand if there's anything else you wanted to say before we wrap up. Go ahead, Kathy.
Just as a reminder, certainly what we have found is that families have been very, very grateful to have us be able to get in there quickly. So many of their other services have been put on hold. So the fact that we are able to get to them, we certainly are getting to assessments, initial assessments, quicker than we did before. We're able to schedule sometime, as quick as by the end of the week. So that they have really appreciated that help.
That's great. That's great. I've heard that too, that families are surprised sometimes that early intervention is carrying on because doctor's appointments are being canceled and lots of things, it just feels like the whole world has kind of been on pause right now, but you guys are carrying on. Any other thoughts before we wrap up? All right, well guys, I so appreciate you taking the time today. I know you guys are juggling all the personal and professional changes just like all of us, so I appreciate your time and you sharing your knowledge and your experiences. I think it's really valuable. It's one thing for me to write a blog or to try to share it, but you guys are the ones doing it every day all the time, so I really appreciate your time and your insights. So thank you very much, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.